politics. I am on the board of the Asian Business League. I want to welcome you on behalf of NAP San Francisco, the Asian Leaders Alliance, and the Asian Business League. Our special guest tonight is Mr. David Lum. David works for Motorola Solutions, which is the two-way radio company, not the cell phone company. And for the past 37 and a half years, he has been working for the company and has been in Singapore for the last 6.5 years. David is a part-time adjunct MBA business professor and has about 20 years at the Lake Forest Graduate School of Management in the Chicago area. That is one of the oldest executive MBA schools in the Midwest region of the United States. David believes in the work of NAP and other Asian professional organizations to support the development of all Asian and Asian American professionals and encourages everyone to get involved to help others through volunteer work and other activities. David's time spent at NAP was one of the most rewarding life experiences he's had. David, thanks again for being here and presenting tonight.
Thank you very much, Keith. I appreciate the introduction. I guess we're all now live streaming from Singapore, so this is probably one of the farthest distances that you guys had. I want to thank NAP San Francisco, in particular John, for reaching out to me, and the Asian Leaders Alliance and the Asian Business League for inviting me to be able to go ahead and provide this presentation. Many of my old NAP friends will probably remember this presentation as I had given it to several NAP conventions and chapters, hopefully to help advance people's careers a bit. This is an abbreviated version because I've only got about 45 minutes to talk about it, and then I've got quick Q&A. I've got a hard stop at the bottom of the hour, so I'd like to ask everybody to either type in your questions into the chat box, so that way Keith and the organizers of this meeting can give them to me later on. We can open it up later on once we have once we move into the open Q&A session. So I'd like for everybody just to listen in. I'm going to kind of go through this very quickly, and then we'll hopefully be able to open it up for some Q&A afterwards. All right? All right. Now, this whole topic is actually talking about office politics. All right. But before I get into office politics, one of the first things that we have to actually talk about is power. All right. We have to understand what power is before we actually talk about office politics. All right. Now, power is also influence. Power, by definition, is really the capacity of a person, any one of you, a team, or an organization to actually influence other people to do things that they may not necessarily want to do on their own or have decided to do on their own. All right. So power is really the potential to influence, with the key word here as being potential. All right. Many of you have power, but you may not use it, or you may have power but not even know that you actually have it. All right. So if you don't have or if you don't use your power, then you're always going to be seen as a potential leader. You're always going to be seen as a leader with potential. Now, the interesting thing is that power does require one's person perception that there's dependence on another person. And we'll get to that when we actually get to another slide here. Now, let me dive in to talk a little bit about individual power. This is all academic stuff that you can actually find in any organizational communication course in an MBA class. Individual power can be separated out into two different categories. One is called position power, and the other one is called personal power. The position power is based on your position in any organization that you are part of, be it at work, be it in a community service organization, be it in a sports club, whatever. All right. Personal power is actually your own characteristic. It's your own individual quality. It's your own self that you bring into it. We're going to dive into each one of these now. We'll talk about position power first. Standard MBA stuff, standard academic stuff that you learn about power. One is legitimate power. This is your title. It's essentially your position or rank within the organization itself. It's where you sit on the org chart. Reward power is your ability to administer valued positive rewards to people, like bonuses, for example, or accolades. Another one is coercive power. It's your ability to actually administer punishment or negative rewards to people. Information power. It's the ability for you to share whatever information that you may have to a subordinate or to other people to be able to do their job, all right? So it's your ability to control information here. That's what information power is all about. Now, the important thing to understand about position power is this power is endowed to you based on the organization that you belong to. In other words, you have these 4 types of power depending upon where you sit in the organization, and it's only there for as long as you are in that position or in that organization. Personal power. One personal power that you may have is something we call rational persuasion. This is your ability to actually talk about or argue logically and with rationale your position or your stance. Another one is referent power. This is how people look at you and whether or not you're liked or admired and used as a role model. Another one is expert power. This is derived a lot from your experience. And experience is based on skills, knowledge, abilities, capabilities. So if you have expert power, people recognize you as an expert in things and will then listen to you. Finally, charisma. It's basically the aura of leadership that you may have. It's the executive presence that you exhibit. It is this attitude of enthusiasm and optimism that draws people to you naturally. Now, what's important to know about personal power is that all of you have this. All of you have it to some degree. All of you could also develop it, refine it, increase it. And this type of power is actually more effective than position power, all right? And you need to learn how to use this, all right? Now, let's get a little bit into politics and what politics is. Politics is really using all of those powers that we just talked about and actually using it. So politics or office politics is power in motion or power in action. Office politics exists because we have 2 individuals, all right, where we have Mary and we have Bob. Now, Bob wants something. It could be more budget. It could be more resources. It could be time. It could be something that he wants. Mary controls the ability to get that object, all right? And so because of that, Mary is actually seen to have power over Bob because Bob wants whatever it is that he wants, and Mary has the power to either deny it or allow it. Now, the key here is that Bob has to perceive that Mary has control or influence over that object. Now, whether or not Mary actually truly has control over it is actually not relevant. It's the perception here that's important, okay? Now, what I want to do is I want to put this in another analogous scenario right here. Mom or dad, and you. Again, you want something. You perceive that mom or dad controls the ability to get that object, and therefore they have power over you. Whether or not mom or dad has control over that is really not relevant. It's the fact that you perceive that mom or dad has control or influence. That's what's important here, all right? And I'm going to continue this theme going out throughout the rest of the presentation. The reason why office politics exists is a number of reasons that's outlined here. When resources are scarce, when there are org changes, when there maybe it's tolerated and supported within the organization itself. In the end, the reason why office politics exists is really for self-preservation and a lot of people keeping the status quo. This is what happens a lot in organizations, especially inside companies. All right. Now, I want to quickly distinguish the difference between positive and negative office politics because many of us have been the victims of negative office politics. And because of that, we tend to shun or shy away from it. And we all say we don't want to deal with it at all. All right. Negative office politics is really the manipulation of other people with the purpose of achieving personal gains at the organization or somebody else's expense. All right, and we've seen a lot of it. We see a lot of it with people in our organizations that do office politics. All right, now positive office politics is the ability to influence others with the purpose of achieving shared goals of individuals involved, meaning within the team, as well as those of the organization itself. So whatever your organization you belong to, whether it's your company, it's your marketing or finance function within your company or within your own church group, it doesn't matter. If you influence the behavior of others for the purpose of achieving shared common goals of the organization, then that's positive politics. But I want you to also consider this. I'm going to change the word positive politics to something else here. Leadership. If you look at leadership, it's really the ability to influence behaviors of others towards a shared common goal. All right. So I want you to look at office politics, positive office politics as leadership. All right. Now, getting back into a little bit of academics, let's talk about those types of powers that we talked about earlier: coercive, reward, legitimate, expert, and referent. It turns out that if you actually look at these types of powers, the use of the wrong type of power will basically make it a lot harder for you to attain what you need to attain. But the use of the right type of power can also help to deepen the commitment of individuals within organizations. If we look at coercive and some of the reward powers, they lead to resistance. So in other words, if you use coercive power, people will essentially do as you ask, but in the end, they could end up resisting. If you use legitimate power, which is where you sit on the org chart, people will do as you ask, but generally not any more than that. So they'll comply. If you use referent power, people will do as you ask, but they'll generally do a lot more because of you, all right? And these can be divided into a variety of what we call hard influence versus soft influence tactics, all right? And we're gonna get into each one of these deeply. So if you use hard tactics, all right, you can use them only if you actually have the actual power in your hand. If you actually have the capability to dole out coercive and reward power. You can't use it if you don't have it, all right? You can use soft tactics to essentially gain a lot more commitment from your team members, all right? And this is always something that you actually have. And this is always a better choice for long-term development of the team, long-term development of the relationships within your organization. You cannot use hard tactics in a soft tactic environment. Many of you may be involved in volunteer activities, and many of you may be committee members and committee leaders. So in a volunteer world, coercive hard tactics will end up chasing volunteers away because there's really nothing to hold them to a volunteer organization. So you have to apply the right tactic to the right environment, all right? Now, another thing to also remember here is that individuals respond differently to hard tactics. All right. Some individuals will respond to coercive power very well, and some will actually fight back. And some will fight back openly, some will become passive aggressive. So you have to understand the type of individual that you're working with to understand what it is that you can actually apply. So a big thing for those of you who are operating in volunteer environments, use soft tactics. It's the best way to actually develop relationships in a volunteer environment and to garnish commitment within the volunteer environment, so that way you can actually get more things done that way. You can use hard tactics when necessary if it's for the good of the organization. And really, this falls in line with being respected rather than being liked, because sometimes when you use hard tactics, you need to do it in order to get things done. But understand that there are potential ramifications and consequences with it. Now, the real meat and the real heart of this presentation is really getting into these things here, what I call the games that people play for office politics. And these 13, I'm going to go over each one of them. It is ranked in order of effectiveness, and I will be presenting it in order of effectiveness. So we'll talk about it, and hopefully you'll be able to recognize some of these as I talk about the examples. All right. So let's talk about the first one, rational persuasion. Here, what we're talking about is using logical arguments and facts to actually persuade others to do what you want them to do. All right. Now, the interesting thing is that for those of us who are in the science, technology, engineering, or mathematical fields, STEM areas, we generally like to use rational arguments. It's a natural thing for us in the STEM world. All right. And in business, those that are data-driven organizations, or those organizations that actually have a data-driven mentality and culture, you'll want to always try to use this all the time. So a lot of your time and a lot of your influence wins will actually be spent here, provided that you persuade with the information correctly. All right. So this is a natural position for most of us to actually execute. Most of us will execute a rational persuasion. We will come up with rational, logical arguments and hope that the other party listens to our rationale and then be persuaded to our position. But this doesn't necessarily occur all the time. All right. So this is important to understand. This is what we naturally go to. All right. Now, inspirational appeal. This is where you actually arouse enthusiasm by appealing to one's values, ideals, and beliefs. All right. Now, in this particular case, what we're really talking about is standing up and actually talking about, hey, here's the values of our organization. We should all be a part of it. We should all be executing to this. All right. Some variations behind this is going for the sympathy vote. Right. So you'll actually you can actually hear some, for example, politicians stand up and they talk about the sadness of certain things and maybe the negative consequences of certain things. And so what you want to do is then you inspire people based on something bad or negative that happened, just to try and gain the sympathy vote. All right. Another type of thing that we've seen in the American politics is the us versus them, where Donald Trump is trying to stir up his base. So he's trying to inspire them against the leftists or the Democrats. So he uses an us versus them type of mentality, and likewise Joe Biden did the same thing, us versus them. All right. So with the inspirational appeal, what we're really talking about here is really diving deeper down into people's values, trying to identify with the people's values and beliefs and trying to get them to come along. This particular type of game is very effective because it really gets down into a person's deep-seated cultural values. It tries to identify with that person, all right? Now, the third type of game that people can play is something we call personal appeal. Here is where it gets much, much more personal than the inspirational. The inspirational appeal is really trying to get to the larger group, whereas the personal appeal, you're actually talking more so to a person, all right? You're trying to appeal to their sense of loyalty or their sense of friendship before you actually make a request. A variation of that is putting a friend on a guilt trip. Let's say that you need something from that person, and maybe you do a personal appeal to get them to do something, but if they don't do it, then maybe you escalate it by going to the guilt trip. An example here was actually John of NAP San Francisco. He actually reached out to me and made a personal appeal to me based on our friendship in order to come in and do this presentation right now. So based on our friendship, I agreed to do it. Had I not agreed, John had the option of doing a guilt trip if he wanted to on me to make me feel guilty and then try to press me to do this presentation. But fortunately, he didn't have to do that. All right, ingratiation is another game. This is where you're actually getting someone to do something that you want by putting them in a good mood or getting him or her to like you, all right? So one variation of this is actually doing it via word of mouth. Another one is doing it via public adornment. Let me give you an example of how at home somebody does this. We all heard of the examples where maybe a daughter who loves a father, she wants something like maybe the keys to the car or permission to go to a dance, and so the daughter comes up to the dad and says, "Oh, Dad, you're really the best dad around. I really love you." Blah 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 blah, and that gets the dad really ingratiated. And so what ends up happening is the dad says, "Oh yes, no problem. Here's the keys to the car, or here's some money to spend," and so on. So this is what ingratiation is all about. Those of us who are parents, we've experienced this from our kids. Those of us who are kids, we've done this to our parents, all right? And so I want you to understand that this is something that we've all experienced, all right? On a personal level, not just at work. Impression management. This is really your own personal brand. This is shaping your own public image, all right? So this is your use of LinkedIn, all right? This is how you dress. So this is essentially your ability to manage your own reputation and your image. If you develop a very big and broad image, it will actually serve you well. Now, the impression management, there is also an interesting variation to this, something that I call power by association. So this is where, for example, let's say John is a very long time face in NAP San Francisco, all right? So if I wanted to get in the good graces of San Francisco people, all right, I can associate myself with John. And if I connect with John via LinkedIn, and if I do more branding and showing that I'm very well connected with John, it actually will help people's impression of me, all right? So this is where our ability to actually use LinkedIn is actually very important. When you actually link with people, you want to be very careful about who you want to link with, all right? This is the impression management is very, very important because people nowadays, especially now with COVID-19 going around, when you talk to customers, when you look at customers, when recruiters look at you, they will look at your LinkedIn, they'll look at your Facebook, they'll look at all the social media outlets that you connect with to see what kind of person you are. So you have to leave a very good impression before they actually meet you physically, all right? This is one that you have to actually manage, and this one is really focused on you and you yourself, not so much the relationship with other people, all right? But this does have an effect, all right? Consultation is another game that we play. This is actually asking for participation in decision making, pulling together a team of people and then actually getting them actively involved. Through the consultation process, you have the ability then to actually influence people, all right? Exchange. This is where you're promising some benefits in exchange for complying with a request. So you're bartering or you're trading, all right? Again, in the home, this is where we've done this as like parents. So maybe I've told my sons before, hey, you know what? If you get straight A's this semester, I'm going to give you $100. That's exchange. The benefit is there in exchange for a request. Same thing as us as kids. We've said to our parents, Mom and Dad, can you buy me a Sony PlayStation if I get straight A's this quarter? All right, so we've done that. Another variation to this is paying it forward, where we actually do something early on with the expectation later on of maybe being able to get something back in the future. So that's what exchange is all about. We've done this. Another one is silent authority. Here is where you're actually influencing people without explicitly stating your position within the hierarchy. Let me share with you a very good one. We've all seen this in married couples before. The wife would actually say to the husband, "The trash is full." And what does that mean? That means that the husband is supposed to take out the trash, right? Or I can say to my son, "The grass looks long. Time to mow the lawn." So what ends up happening is we actually command or send out the request without explicitly stating that I am the authority here, and then what ends up happening is that person automatically complies. Okay, that's what a silent authority is all about. We've done this at home. Legitimizing. Here is where you're actually using your legitimate position in the organization to actually make the request. So let's say, for example, you're part of a committee. Maybe you're part of the membership committee in your volunteer organization, or you're part of a recruitment drive in one of your community activities, the membership committee, for example. And what ends up happening is you end up saying, hey, I am the chairperson of this membership committee. So this is what I'm supposed to do. And therefore, what ends up happening is people will then comply to what requests you make because of your position as chairperson of the membership committee, right? So you're actually using and stating clearly either the policies, the practices, what you're responsible for, or your title within that organization, and you use that to actually get your requests done. Another one is upward appeal. Here is where you're gaining support from people above with higher authority. Say, suppose, for example, maybe your committee members aren't working very well, so you then go up to your VP at the next higher up within your community organization or volunteer organization. Or maybe your boss isn't listening to you and you decide to go to your boss's boss. That, of course, comes with certain consequences and ramifications depending upon the organization that you're with. But let me give you another example. At home, let's say, for example, I want to use the car and Dad says absolutely not. And so what I do is I go to Mom instead and I say, Mom, Dad won't let me use the car. And Mom then beats up on Dad to give me the car. That could be an upward appeal. Or we go to the grandparents. That could also be done. So it's whoever has the higher authority that's the person you go to essentially get what you want. All right. Again, we've all experienced this as parents. All right. And we've probably done it as kids. Coalition building. This is where you're persuading and seeking the assistance of others to actually come with you as a big team to go forward with what you want. All right. So coalition building is essentially getting a bunch of people around your objective and then just building up a team of people to go after it together. All right. Another variation of this is whistleblowing. What happens is if a person tries to he sees something wrong, he tries to escalate it, and it doesn't work, they get constantly blocked. Then what we see is a consequence of whistleblowing where they actually then make it public by going to the public media, and all of a sudden the entire public sees what's going on, and the public then joins this person towards trying to fix this problem. All right. So this is coalition building. All right. Again, we actually see this also in families, in communities, volunteer organizations, where we actually will get people together to actually support our position to go after what we want. All right. Information control. This is where we control somebody's access to information, so that way we can change somebody's attitudes. And it's not necessarily holding back information. It's also providing information that may not necessarily be true. We've seen a lot of this with Donald Trump actually sending a lot of misinformation, and that is actually helping to change people's attitudes and or behaviors because of it. All right. So information control is very, very important, especially nowadays with a lot of social media that's out there. The democratization of social media, the ability for everyone to actually get information at any time, now allows for the manipulation of people, unfortunately. All right. But you need to understand that you actually have control over this. All right. Assertiveness and pressure. This is where you're actually trying to get compliance by people or get their support or agreement, where you're actually using either positive or negative rewards. Playing up fears, shaming people, public rebuke. Those are all the negative ways of doing it. Standing your ground is really more your assertiveness, all right? Where maybe somebody's trying to get you to do something, but you won't. So what you do is you basically stand your ground and you make it publicly known, I am not going to do this, all right? So you have to learn to use the right tactic for the right situation. I've gone through all 13 tactics and given you some ideas of how we've used them before, either in a work, in a community, or in a personal or family situation. You have to learn how to use the right tactic for the right situation. An example here is a daughter asks for money or dance, permission to go to a dance. What kind of tactic would she use? Could she use coercive? Probably not. Maybe she might want to use a more softer thing, a softer tactic to get mom and dad to allow it to happen. Like, for example, bartering or ingratiation. All right. So many of you who are volunteer leaders, you may manage volunteers who aren't delivering on their commitments on time. What kind of tactics are best and what kind of tactics should be avoided? Well, it depends on what commitments are on time. All right. What kind of tactics may be best for those commitments that may be running into a deadline? Maybe you might want to use a harder tactic because you're already at or past the deadline that you need it in. All right. What tactics should be avoided? Hard tactics should always be avoided with volunteers because that's a good way to actually chase them away from your volunteer activity. And for volunteer things, you need them. All right. One tip that I would give all of you who are in volunteer positions, use soft tactics early. If you use soft tactics early on in the relationship, that's how you can actually gain a commitment by them to actually then do the commitments on time. All right. That was my experience when I was running an Asian affinity group inside my company. What I always did was I always worked on the soft tactics early on rather than the hard, and then used the hard only after the soft didn't work at all. All right. Another example is asking for a pay raise from your boss. What tactics would you use? All right. I would actually use more of the softer tactics because your boss actually has the hard tactics available to him, but it may be possible to use coercive power. You do have some level of coercive power back against him. Namely, you could say, hey, you know what? If I don't get this raise and I really need it, I'm gonna seriously consider looking for a new job. And you know what? That is coercive power. That's a threat to your boss. It's possible to do. You could also use upward appeal, backed up with rational persuasion. All right. Now, I want all of you to really think about these 13 items as tools. Each one of them is a tool in your toolbox. All right. And some of you have experience with some of them. Some of you have never used some of these before and therefore didn't know that you had these tools available to you that you could use. Some of you may never have used them and are not comfortable with doing it, like ingratiation, for example, or impression management. Maybe you don't like the idea of using social media, but maybe you need to. All right. So I want all of you to think of each of these 13 items as tools in your toolbox. All right. Some of you only have maybe 2 tools that you're comfortable using, the hammer and the wrench. All right. And maybe you've never ever used a vice grip before, or maybe some of you have never used the Allen wrench before. Now's the time to actually start acquiring some of these tools to use in your toolbox. When there are 2 or more people involved, then you will actually see multiple tactics observed. All right. Now, you have to select the right one to use. If you use the wrong one, something that's close or nearby to that ranking that I gave you might actually work. All right. So maybe if the inspirational appeal didn't work, maybe the personal appeal might. All right. Now, another thing that's also interesting is that if you can use 2 or more simultaneous tactics together on the same one person, it'll actually help to deepen or reinforce the commitment or the compliance to getting what you want. For example, maybe what you want to do is you want to combine rational appeal, your rational persuasion, with a personal appeal. If you do both together on that one person, it might actually get you some results. More oftentimes than not, we usually use rational persuasion only on one person, and that's it. And maybe what it takes is some other combination of a tactic to actually help you get it over the line. All right. Now, on the flip side, for each one of us, we also have ways that we can be influenced. All right. If we learn that if we learn about ourselves and understand ourselves, so this gets into the self-awareness piece of it, we can understand how we're influenced. Okay. And if we learn other people, if we learn them deeply, we can also learn new ways to also influence them. Okay. Now, in order for us to also build trust in a relationship, and this helps you in your leadership journey, all right, you should also teach other people what's important to you and allow them to influence you in that manner, all right? So it's a give and take. All relationships should be give and take, okay? All right, so I want you to rethink politics. I want you to rethink office politics for yourself. It's really all about influence. It's about leadership. That's really what it is. All right. So let me give you some tips on being an effective leader, or we can also say organizational politician, which, by the way, is what managers are expected to do in any organization. All right, managers of people. The first and foremost is you have to make a decision to engage in influencing on the things that is going to matter to you. This is what we call leadership. You have to decide, hey, I will start positively and proactively influencing on the things that matter most to me in this organization. You have to believe in the organization and align to its mission. You have to believe in why the organization exists and what its purpose is. And if you believe in that and align to its mission, then you're going to be very good. All right. Be sensitive to your own desires and career goals. Understand why you're there. All right. And what you want out of this relationship with the organization. Control and manage your emotions. Anger and envy have no place in many businesses or organizations. They serve to really mostly hurt, although sometimes it can actually energize. It's actually short-lived, all right? Learn to control and manage your emotions. Be more aware of organization relationships, how everybody relates to everybody, all right? Build your own relationships within the organization. And it's not just with your own team that you're managing. It has to be with your peers, and it has to be with other managers in other organizations. Develop and maintain that trust. Above all, integrity is very, very important, all right? And continue working on meaningful business results, all right? In the end, you work for somebody, be it at work, be it at a volunteer organization, be it your community organization. In the end, you have to still deliver some type of result that matters to somebody above you, all right? So if you follow these tips, you'll be an effective organizational politician. There's 4 kinds of people inside any organization, all right? There's those that determines what happens, people. They're part of the inner circle. They're essentially the decision makers. There are those that make it happen, people. They're part of the political structure. They're in the know. The determines what happened people depend on the make it happen people. The make it happen people essentially controls all the resources and the information. There's the watch what's happening people. They're the doers, and they're essentially the resources. And they're the wonder what happened people, all right? So you have to decide which group you're going to be with. The top 2 are really those who drive the organization. They proactively lead. The bottom 2 are the reactive followers. Ultimately, you have to decide which group do you want to be a part of. Do you want to be part of the leadership, or do you want to always be part of the followers? Let me I only got a couple more slides. Let me give you some office politics truisms, or very typical sayings that you should be aware of. You should acknowledge that office politics does exist, and it does everywhere, and that other people will actually do it all around you. You have no control over other people. You can only control your own responses to office politics that may be happening to you. You don't have to like office politics to engage in it. All right. You can still succeed in your career without doing any of the things that I've told you, except maybe rational persuasion. All right. But it's only going to get you successful up to a point. All right. Beyond that point, it'll be a lot easier if you actually use many of the other tactics. Eventually, you're going to need office politics as your tools to climb up further within the ladder. The beautiful thing about office politics and these tactics that I gave you is that it actually helps you to get things done with a lot less effort and maybe a lot quicker. All right. As you get older and older, you're going to find that you're going to have a lot less time to do things. So being able to do things more efficiently and effectively with less effort will actually help. And these tactics will help you get there. So in summary, What I want all of you to know is that you have already experienced office politics in your life, in your family life. You have already even done it to other people in your family life, all right? So I want you to reframe what office politics is, all right? You already have a lot of personal power. Some of you may not have it honed. Some of you may not have used it. You need to use it as much as possible. Choose to actively engage in office politics to help with your organization's goals, and also to attain your own personal goals at the same time, all right? If you don't participate in this, that's fine. You don't have to. It's really up to you. But what's going to end up happening is you're going to always feel that somebody's playing politics all around you, and you may do a good job, you may still succeed, but you're always going to be seen as a leader with potential rather than a leader who's really doing things. All right? So choose to engage in positive office politics. Positive office politics means the organization comes first. All right? Building in power and influence is really a lifelong activity that will actually help you to achieve much bigger things within the organization that you're a part of, be it your work organization, if you believe in that, or your community organization, or your church, or your sports organization. In the end, office politics allows you to exercise your leadership much, much easier than before, all right? And much more effectively. So this is why it's important to actually engage in it. I want to leave with you, I want to leave this thought with you. Office politics is mostly shunned by Asians. There was a very interesting study that was done in California. I think it was in San Francisco many years ago. And it showed that all Asians absolutely hate politics because they've been hurt by it. And my assertion here is we as Asians have been sitting on the sideline executing things, waiting for things to happen or waiting for us to be told to do things rather than actually leading in front. So I want you to reframe office politics as really leadership, your own ability to lead people and do things. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and open it up for questions. Keith?
David, thanks again for an amazing presentation, very relevant. And I thank you that you've also offered for the audience to have your presentation available post event tonight. So I think that's very helpful. So I think at the end, when we just started getting into the Asian professionals, particular the nuances around office politics, I think that's a very interesting question, right? Because I think where you sit, you spent a lot of time being a Asian American, and then now you're living in Singapore. You probably see what we often coach and teach is that there is a Western style of leadership and an Eastern style of leadership. And I'll just summarize that the Eastern style leadership, if you come from East Asia before coming to the United States, it's more of a, back to your point, like the organization comes first, which it always should in your work setting. The nuance is that the office politics, you're letting things get dictated towards you, kind of wait in that East Asian stereotypical environment when you work in Asia versus working in the US, where you actually have to be more of a thoughtful leader and be more proactive. So what other tools and techniques do you think are specific to Asian or Asian Americans?
What other tools or techniques? Actually, what I found is that these 13 tactics are actually very, very good. By the way, all of these tactics that I've talked about actually come from the academic world. This has been very well researched. All I did was basically collate it all and consolidate it all for everybody here to make it a little bit easier to consume and to digest. I will tell you that if you have all of these tactics down, it will help you. I've out here in Asia, I've seen a wide variety of successful Asians use the same tactics. These 13 tactics exist out here in the Eastern world as well as in the Western world. So it really doesn't matter. I actually see it as not so much Eastern versus Western. I see it more as a who uses these more and who doesn't have these as part of their tools in their toolbox.
That's a great point. And I think also it's critical in all these sessions that you're really uh, invoking self-awareness. I mean, that, as you know, because as you mentioned, David, some people are just not comfortable engaging in politics, and it's okay not to. Just be aware that it'll still happen around you. Another follow-up question, especially for those who are now asking, probably more of how to apply the technique. How do you affirm your personal power as when you're in a junior role and you're actually looking for broaden activities or opportunities to go upwards? How do you do that without looking like you're going around your boss or making your boss look bad?
Okay. So, um, uh, assuming a person in a junior role or younger person, the best thing that you can do is actually develop yourself. So remember that we talked about personal power. Okay, let me get to that slide. We talked about personal power, and those exist within you. It's a matter of you actually developing your personal power right here. All right. So rational persuasion, one of the best things that you can do as a junior person or somebody who's younger in the working world, learn how to rationally present your case. All right. Charisma, executive presence. One of the things that I tell all the Asian professionals in the US is go to Toastmasters. I am a fervent believer in Toastmasters. It is the fastest, cheapest way to actually develop your speaking ability, your ability to have presence in front of a crowd, your ability to speak well. You can do that outside of your boss, and your boss, that doesn't threaten your boss, all right? But it's something that you need to do. Another area that you can also do, develop your expert power. Become an excellent individual contributor in the area that you're working in. So let's say, for example, maybe you're a marketing person. Well, develop the necessary skills and knowledge to become an excellent, heavily dependent upon marketing person. If you're a finance person, really learn all the different ways that finance could be done and learn the policies, learn the rules, stay within the rules, of course, stay within compliance, but learn how to actually help people with that knowledge. So that way you end up helping your boss look good. If you help your boss look good, you never threaten your boss. Okay.
Thanks, David. And how do you deal with office wolves? I'm going to interpret that question with conflict, and when you know how to trust colleagues, or when you know how to trust colleagues, or when do you know when they're office wolves?
All right. So office wolves. So these are the people that may be actually practicing negative office politics. Yeah. Well, there's plenty of actually books about that out in the market about how you deal with really bad people. Lots of books about that. My recommendation is you stick to your own good nature and your own good character. Um, you'll generally survive those types of people as long as you exercise high levels of trust and capability. Um, build up your personal power and continue working for the organization. You continue working for, as long as you continue exercising positive politics, what ends up happening is your bosses will actually see that. Um, uh, Even my organization, we've had a lot of negative office politicians, and eventually they always get weeded out. Negative office politicians always strive to get things the way that they want, but eventually they end up faltering because their goals are more personal than the organization's, and so they end up eventually getting weeded out. You just have to put up and tolerate with them, but you continue doing what you need to do for the organization and for yourself as well. And Those around you will see that and give you support. All right.
All right. Well, David, with that, I know we're at 6:30 Pacific, and I know you have to run off. So I want to thank you again for spending your time with us tonight, giving us this very valuable presentation, and hope you have the rest. It's daytime in Singapore, so hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah. Thank you. Again, I just want to say hi to all my NAP friends nationwide. Very good to see all of you on here. Thank you also to NAP San Francisco, in particular, John, for pulling me in. Thank you also to the Asian Leaders Alliance and the Asian Business League for hosting this webinar. Thank you.
Okay. Have a good day. So for those with us now, we're about to transition into our open networking session. We do, after every one of our presentations, we give it a time for people to get to know each other. If you haven't tried it out before, I highly encourage it. You'll get to know some folks. Before I do that, I wanted to actually let you know of our next event, which is going to be a holiday networking mixer. And here are the details. If you can see that, you don't have the right presentation. Okay, so we will send out the actual announcement through Hub and our organization emails, but we have scheduled for December 16th, Wednesday, 5:30 to 7 p.m. It's not going to have a featured speaker. It's going to be more of breakout sessions and a fun activity.
So we hope to see everyone.